Okay, welcome back to KP Unpacked. This is usually my opportunity to ask KP Ready, hey, what were you thinking when you posted that on LinkedIn? But today, we're going to call this the Mastermind Edition because as we add more and more guests to the podcast, one of the things that we're doing is we're inviting all of our mastermind members in so that we can talk with them. We can learn more about them, what they do, who they are, who they work for, what they're focused on, and then maybe we'll unpack one of KP's posts. We can guess. What do you think KP was thinking about when he posted that on LinkedIn? My name is Jeff Eccles. If we've never met before, I am a senior advisor at KP Ready Company. And today I am joined by a member of our early and mid-career mastermind group, Iman Orsami. And so Iman, welcome. I'm glad you're here. Tell us where here is for you. It's a different time of day where you are than it is where I am.
Yes. So my name's Iman. I'm based in Copenhagen. So it is deep into the evening here.
Very good. Well, thank you for joining me in the evening. I know it's after work for you, um, which is, I guess, is the case. It's even later usually, or maybe I guess it's about the same time, right? When our early and mid-career mastermind meetings are. And Iman has been participating in that group for several months now, I suppose. Iman, why don't you tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, what your background is, and maybe a little bit about what your aspirations for the future are?
Yes. So my name's Iman. I'm a senior engineer at Ramboll, which are a Danish engineering consulting firm. So originally, as you might be able to tell from the accent, I'm from the UK. So I was born and raised in London, and I did a Master's of Engineering degree in civil engineering in Southampton. That's where I joined Ramboll, and was working for Ramboll for 5 years in their Southampton office, and have recently transferred to the head office in Copenhagen. So I joined Ramboll as a graduate bridge engineer, so civil structures is where I started, but I quite quickly moved into quite a new team at the time. So this was the uh, digital development team where I started writing code to do some steel design of motorway gantries, and things just developed from there. So I've been at Ramboll for almost 6 years, and most of that time has been software development focused, but I've also spent uh, best part of the year working on major infrastructure projects in the UK as both a project and commercial manager, as well as a structural engineer. So a bit of a mixed background.
Yeah, sure. And that makes sense, right? You're relatively early in your career. You got a lot of years ahead of you. And it's interesting to me as I listen, so my background is architecture. I graduated from architecture school and got a lot of friends and colleagues that have went to engineering school. Maybe they came out as civil engineers or structural engineers, something like that, that would have a similar experience to yours up until the point where you join that team, that very different team, right? And you're looking at your coding for software and things like that, which I don't think is all that unusual a story in our early and mid career mastermind group. I mean, I think there are a lot of people that are living the new reality of what is architecture, what is engineering, what does construction look like in 2025 and beyond. So I think that's pretty exciting that you come out, you have this background, this training, this focus, and you're going about it maybe a different way than some of the folks that came up at the same time I did, which is I guess to be expected too, because that was a long time ago where where we started to come up. As we were talking, and we were talking about some of KP Ready's LinkedIn posts. So by the way, if you're listening to this and you're not following KP Ready on LinkedIn, you should. He's maxed out on connections there, and so he always goes through this process of opening up new connections when he can, et cetera. But for now, follow KP on LinkedIn, and it's just KP, the letters K and P, and then Reddy, Reddy. He posts usually about 3 times a day, and his posts come from a variety of places, a variety of resources. When he's on the road speaking, when he's doing advisory work with AEC firms, when he's working with investors or startups, um, thoughts that he has as he travels, right? Um, they come from a variety of places, but they are all posts where he's looking at the future of the built environment, how we design, how we construct, the materials that we use, how we invest, how we operate, how we own these types of assets in the built environment. So if you're not following him, you should. And then I would also encourage you to reach out to Iman on LinkedIn as well and connect with him there, because I think you're going to get some good insights from a very different point of view here. That's the whole purpose for these conversations, for these interviews. So as Iman and I were talking, we settled on this post, which I'll read, and then Iman and I will start to unpack it. So if you're following along at home, as we're recording this and I'm looking at LinkedIn, KP posted this on about February 3rd, 2025. So if it's the year 2030 or something like that for you, you've got to go back 5 years and find February 3rd. It goes like this. Seeing a real shift in construction tech startups moving from pure play SaaS to more tech-enabled service models used to be a no-no in VC or venture capital. With AI, these tech-enabled businesses are able to deliver venture metrics of growth and gross margins. It's pretty exciting. So, Iman, when you read that post, what was the first thing that popped into your mind as you were reading what KP was thinking there?
So while I'm involved in the tech side of construction, I'm not in the startup space. So essentially, what our team do at Ramble, we create lots of little startups essentially throughout the year. We're always working on multiple different projects to try and build and deploy for the transport sector. And we've seen how difficult adoption is, even when we are inside the organization and people, trust us and they'll pick up our phone calls, etc. So that was the first thing that resonated with me. So it's much, much easier to say yes to a service than it is to accept all of the overhead that comes with adopting a new tool, on top of purchasing a new tool, on top of going through the internal processes in order to get a tool approved by IT and the higher ups.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. I mean, another hat that I wear within our organization is directing our startup incubator, and so many times, not all the times, we do have corporate startups. So we might one day have one of the startups from Ramble that is, joins the incubator, and we walk through some of the early stages. We do that sometimes with that's what we would call a corporate startup, but um, the majority of the startups that go through our program are what most people would think of as startups. So those traditional startups with founders have maybe exited an engineering firm or something like that, and they're out on their own with an idea, a problem to solve. And what you're saying is something that we've heard before from corporate startups. Hey, we're building this in house, right? These are our people, um, and adoption is still slow or difficult, or it's hard to get people to help us, dial this in various different forms. So that it does not surprise me at all, right? That's your reaction. I do find it interesting in the post, as KP stated, he said, construction tech is moving from a pure SaaS play to more tech-enabled service models. So, and this is a drum that he's beating, and we're hearing this across the industry. I think we're hearing more and more about this. It's okay. There's software, sure, but this is still service industry. Engineering is professional services, architecture is professional services, construction management is professional services. So maybe we're talking about the intersection of a Venn diagram or something like that, right? or does the software overlap and help us become more efficient, or whatever the goal is in some way in our in the services that we provide. And so I think that idea with the idea that in the past VCs were not going to be investing in services firms, but now, with some of the things that you're working on, perhaps that changes the mind of who knows if your firm has any interest in taking on investment, um, but now we're moving into the realm of the potential for investment with some of the things that you're working on. Have you ever? I don't know how wide your view is or how wide your scope is when you're looking beyond the project that you're working on at the time. But have you looked at the larger impact of those types of projects on the firm? Beyond the coding and the software project itself.
In terms of the business impacts and the value that the
Yeah,
products
yeah,
bring,
I would
or
say, yeah. I mean, maybe not necessarily the value of the firm. I mean, if you have insight on that, sure, absolutely. But maybe just the way that people work, and definitely the way it impacts the business model. Things that you're providing for clients, maybe.
yes. It's a very good question. So some examples of solutions that our team have made in the past, especially around productized designs, have had quite a large impact both on clients and the wider market in general. So we designed systems where we became so cost effective to produce designs. For that particular type of design and type of structure, we were designing 90% plus of that type of structures in the entirety of the UK for a time period. So that had quite a big impact because it was a new way of working that meant our competitors were struggling a lot to compete with us if they continued to do things the traditional way. So in cases like that, it's quite a good example of where adoption is blown away, because once your product or your service gets so much better than everybody else, they either have to improve a lot to keep up, or they won't be able to compete at all.
I think that's a really great point. I think that we are really, well, I know that we're really on this precipice. I've been talking about this for a couple of decades now, and the change, the commoditization of the industry and things like that. And it just seems to be accelerating more and more. And of course, it's that acceleration is enabled by tech. And so, the conversations that I've had for so long are around, you've got to change the business model. You've got to start doing things differently. What if an engineering firm, what if civil and structural engineers start using, developing their own software and using tech to enable their services? What are you going to do then? And what you just described is exactly that scenario playing out. And I think for more and more firms, of course, it's this won't touch everybody, I don't think. I mean, I think there are very small firms that are always going to compete in their very small firm way, but I think at some point there's a threshold where what you're talking about is definitely a threat to those that are not keeping up the way that you are. Um, when you look forward to the future in terms of your own job and the things that you work on, what is it that excites you about the future of engineering, either traditionally, or on a project front, or with the direction that your career is heading?
So I think this might sound a little bit backwards, but I think what excites me the most is there's so much room to improve in the industry and particularly in infrastructure, which is where I'm interested in. So you can find lots and lots of examples um, of major projects where costs spiral out of control and projects in the UK, for instance, have to be cancelled or uh, made a lot smaller. And the construction industry in general hasn't had a major, major shake-up for some say 40 years, 100 years, however many years. But we're building more and more. We're going to need to build more and more. And there's an opportunity for somebody to take advantage of the inefficiencies that are around. And I think that's what really, really excites me because there is a potential to have a world changing impact or a historical impact in this industry. So if you're somebody who comes up with a new material that's cheaper than concrete but is 1% of the carbon emitted, and you manage to get it scaled and used from Indonesia to South America, everywhere, you will have changed the history of humanity. So that's what excites me when I look forward.
All right, I love that. So, are you working on a material like that?
I wish, but no, not at the moment.
So, in your wildest dreams, you look at everything, and maybe you look at it through the lens of infrastructure projects, which is huge. That's a huge lens. I mean, all over the world, certainly here in the United States, where I am, it's one of the major topics of discussion and has been for quite a number of years now. Is infrastructure, infrastructure, infrastructure. Um, So in your wildest dreams, I mean, what's the craziest thing you can think of? What's the craziest idea you have of something that somebody might come up with, and maybe you've heard rumblings, or maybe it's just something that came to you in a dream. Doesn't matter to me. Um, but what's something that you could see that I mean, the example of that material I think is fantastic, right? Not since the Romans, but what's something that is you think is crazy? Maybe it's science fiction, um, but maybe it actually comes true, and maybe what I'm doing in 10 years or 20 years or 5 years, whatever it is completely different because of this crazy idea.
So I probably have scales of crazy. So I'll start at the craziest and then
Okay,
go down.
I like that.
Um, in terms of interplanetary construction, which I'm starting to hear more rumblings about, people talking about building structures on the moon and eventually Mars. So I find the idea of truly autonomous construction quite exciting. So we send some robots and some raw materials, or maybe even not sending any raw materials, just send some robots and they do the mining, they do the processing, they build the structures, and we don't have to do anything. And then using that technology on Earth as well would be quite a change and probably quite a challenge for the construction industry. But that's something that I'd definitely be interested in seeing how that develops. In terms of less crazy stuff on Earth, I always like the idea of a true construction company. So rather than the architects, engineers, contractors all being split up, but having a consolidated building company, and one that's digitally enabled and just gets better and better every single project, where a client can go to them and say, I want a bridge, I want a tunnel, I want a port, and A to Z all done. So I think commercially that's quite interesting on Earth, which I'd like to see more of. Um, yeah,
Well, I think I think both of those ideas, I love both of them. And so, some people are aware that one of the portfolio companies of the KP's Shadow Ventures is Icon, and they've been talking about building on the moon, building on the Mars, on Mars. Um, yeah, I don't know how far away that really is. I don't know how far out there, figuratively speaking, that is. It's super exciting. Um, Icon is one that's talking about it, as I said, and they may be. I don't know what time horizon they're realistically looking at, but they're working with NASA right now on some of those ideas. And I do think it's like I'm a Formula One fan, and when you watch racing at that level and you watch basically these very exotic race cars, you go, well, that's cool. And they're super expensive and they're really fast, and it's all fun. But a lot of that technology eventually trickles down, and brakes and suspension and things like that eventually trickle down to something that's closer to what you or I might actually drive one day. But I think we're probably going to see similar things happening with these wild ideas of the moon and Mars. How can we then turn around and, as you said, bring it back? And I think your idea of a true construction firm, as you called it, I think that's really intriguing. And my feeling is that as we've moved from, you said earlier, 40 years or 100 years, it depends on how old the person is that's talking about it. Do they remember 100 years or do they remember 40 years? So I typically say 100 years. but um, but the point is, it's been a long time, right? We've spent 40 or 100 years, I think, getting more and more siloed. And your description of that true construction firm is essentially breaking those silos down, right? And coming back to something. And the way that I think about that is coming back to something that serves our clients better. That's my opinion. That's the way that I think about it. Is when you think about that true construction firm, as you call it, is that what you're thinking about as the client comes and you kind of described, hey, I want a bridge, I want a tunnel, I want a port. Is that the point? Is it to serve clients better, or is there some other angle that you're seeing there?
Both to serve clients better in terms of cutting out any competing or conflicting interests. I know that's the role of contracts, to
Right.
incentivize people to act that way, but then it cuts that complexity out
Right.
as well from having multiple parties. But also in the interest of getting better as a collective. So the lessons from the architecture, the engineering, the actual construction, they all continuously feed in together. So learning is something institutional learning is something that I care a lot about, in terms of making sure when we do something, we learn from it. We don't make the same mistakes again. So
Yeah.
having all of the disciplines in one place, and at the end of the day, the goal is to build something. Or some people might disagree in terms of the nature of whether you're consulting or not. And I think at the end of the day, it is to build something, and we've made these disciplines in order to help us do that. But um, hopefully, that will see a blurring between the lines of different disciplines as well. Like you said, it's got a lot more specialized. Um, Architects and engineers, their courses aren't so similar these days as they maybe once used to be. And it'd be nice to have people with a broader skill set across uh, across different aspects of the construction industry.
I like that. I like that point of view. It is exciting, as KP said at the end of his post there, which I'll reread here in a minute. But um, so I'm going to have you back on here in a few years, right? Once we start to see some true construction firms as you have described them. I'm going to have you back, and we're gonna break it down. I'm gonna let you grade it. How's it going? How are they doing? How are they getting better? Because I like that idea. It's sort of it's shortening the feedback loop, right? It's shortening that loop. It's shortening that loop, and it's allowing us to learn faster, and I think learn better lessons, which is I think the point that you're trying to make. So I think that's a fantastic idea. I love it. So let me read KP's post one more time, and then we'll wrap this up. I'm joined today on this mastermind edition of KP Unpacked by Iman Warsami, and today we're talking about a post on LinkedIn that KP Reddy wrote, and it goes like this: seeing a real shift in construction tech startups, moving from pure play SaaS to more tech-enabled service models. It used to be a no-no in the VC world. With AI, these tech-enabled businesses are able to deliver venture metrics of growth and gross margins, and it's pretty exciting. I agree, it's pretty exciting. And Iman, I really appreciate your insights into this post, and also getting to know you better and what you're working on and how you're working, because that's pretty exciting too. It's KP graduated as a civil engineer. He just had a birthday recently, so he makes fun of me all the time. He says I'm the old guy in the room. Right now, for a period of about a month and a half, he and I are the same age. So he graduated from civil engineering school a long time ago, as did I from architecture school. So there's that. But it's great to have you on here, Iman, and I appreciate you digging into this post and being part of our mastermind program, and showing up. And for those of you that are out there that aren't aware of what we do in the early and mid-career mastermind groups, we bring in guest mentors for every session to give insights on industry, insights on background, insights on technology, things that are going on. And all of these members, like Iman, to the person, show up for these conversations, and they hold it up. They have great questions. They really dig into it with these mentors, and hopefully they're getting a lot out of it. So Iman, thank you for being a member of the mastermind group, and thanks you for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you very much, Jeff, for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, everybody, thanks for joining us today. We'll be back again next week with another edition. I'm continually recording with our mastermind members, with some of our guest mentors as well, and with KP Reddy. So we'll be back with another episode of KP Unpacked next week. Thanks, everybody.